So it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the interview series of Mentor My Board, that's Boardroom Talks. Boardroom is a place where fortunes of great companies are written, and hence, in the pursuit of bringing best practices of boardrooms and best practices followed by eminent directors, independent directors, professionals, and from the corporate India and international boardrooms to you, we have come out with the interview series with directors, professionals, and business leaders who have been guiding and acting as torch bearers for corporates and the boardrooms. Let me first introduce Mentor My Board to you. Mentor My Board is a platform wherein corporate directors come together to learn, to network, to sharpen their boardroom skills and get opportunity of serving on the companies to act as directors, women directors, independent directors, and also get mentored by expert mentors in the area of business, governance, finance, marketing, strategy, and so on. We are on a mission to transform Indian corporate directors and boardrooms and create a community of 1 lakh directors by 2027. We help directors who are continuously looking to sharpen their boardroom skills and leadership skills, upgrade their knowledge on better governance. So here what we do is we have directors roundtable, we have conferences, we have summits, we have a lot of courses which have been specially designed for startup boardrooms, for the promoter directors, for the independent directors, for the women directors, and that really helps them to keep sharpening their saw. So let me tell you, we have recently been conducting these boardroom talk series and we have been getting valuable response and suggestions from you all. So keep liking, keep watching, and also write in the comment box if you want someone to be invited for this boardroom talk series. So today, I, CS Divya Momaya, founder of Mentor My Board, invite our esteemed moderator, CS Bharti Iyer, who has reached 30 years of experience into the insurance sector, and she is an eminent advisor to Mentor My Board. And today, let's get ready for the boardroom talk with Mr. Sandip Das. And I request Bharti to introduce Mr. Sandip Das to all of us. Over to you, Bharti.
Thank you.
Bharti, you're on mute. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Divya. Wonderful to be back on the series, in the first of the series after Diwali. Wishing all of us, everyone all over the world, a wonderful festival of lights. Let's hope we get past coronavirus in 2020 itself. So wish you once again a very happy Diwali. Welcome, Sandip. It's my immense pleasure to introduce you and an honor also. I will go through your list of achievements, which are a number. So guys, please don't hold your breath. It's really a wonderful list of achievements. So Sandip Das is a highly regarded and very successful international CEO and a business and strategic thought leader. He started his career in 1978 as a management trainee in the DCM Shriram Group, followed by a stint with Toyota Motor Corporation in the Middle East, Dubai. At 35, he became India's first private licensed telco CEO with Hutchison Max Telecom, now known as Vodafone India, and in 1994. In 2006, he went on to head Malaysia's Maxi Group as Group CEO and a board director, overseeing the operations across Maxis Malaysia, Airtel India, Sri Lanka Telecom, and Axis Indonesia, based out of Kuala Lumpur. In 2013, he joined Reliance Jio as MD and CEO. In 2015, he left to do an AMP at Harvard Business School. He won the award for Best Malaysian CEO in 2012, raising the largest telco IPO of US $3.9 billion for Maxis. He was also listed among the 10 most powerful people in telecom globally by Global Telecoms magazine for 4 years successively between 2009 and to 2013. He was also awarded Lifetime Achievement Award for his contribution to Indian telecom in 2016 by the Voice and Data magazine. It also gives me a lot of pleasure to mention that he is currently on the board of directors and an advisor to STL Technologies Ltd, Vedanta Group, an independent board director of Greenlam Industries, a telecom advisor to a leading international bank, advisor to a reputation management company, Astrum, an empaneled consultant with Gerson Lehrman Group, and mentor advisor to various startup companies. He is on Russell Reynolds National Nomination Committee Council. Sandip has graduated in mechanical engineering from the National Institute of Technology, NIT Roorkela, in 1978, received an MBA from the Faculty of Management Studies, the University of Delhi. He is also an alumnus of the Advanced Management Program, AMP 188 from the Harvard Business School. Welcome once again, Sandip. Like I said, I'm sure our viewers have not held their breath. Long and impressive list of achievements. And like you were just mentioning offline, how did I fish you out? There's no need to fish out such a star. Welcome, Sandeep. Gives me a great pleasure. So, we had already discussed what we would be like. So, I would just like you to, basically mention regarding your skill sets, which brought you onto the board, the luminary positions which you have occupied. Just go through it, please.
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be on this platform. And thank you, Divya and Bharti, for inviting me here, and Bharti for your very lucid presentation of my background. I just want to make one small correction. I was not among the top 10, but the top 100. Top 10 would have been fantastic. But, but nonetheless, anyway, it's all in the past. I must say that on a number of occasions, people asked me what are the qualities required of a board member. And I was thinking about it very deeply this morning, and I said that a lot of qualities that are required of not only board members, but executives or people in any kind of position are actually, some of them are really common traits. For example, you need to be of very high integrity. You need to be, nowadays they use this term of being authentic, which is to be absolutely clairvoyant and transparent in what you do. You need to have your heart and head in the right place. You need to have very, very sharp strategic focus, ability to take complex things and make it simple. And we must always remember that organizations and everything is run by people, and therefore you must have great skills being able to lead people to where they go. In fact, like they say, a leader is a person who takes people to a place where they won't go by themselves. And I think that's really what is critical. You create a lot of self-belief. As leaders, you need enormous amount of ability to communicate in a manner that you are effective. In fact, like they say again, when Aeschylus spoke, people said how well he speaks.
Correct.
But when Demosthenes spoke, people said, let's march against Philip. So, that's the kind of...
Again, when Demosthenes spoke?
No, I said when Aeschylus spoke, people said how well he speaks. But when Demosthenes spoke, people said, let's march against Philip. So there's a difference between communicating well and communicating effectively, because all of these skills are very critical in what they do, in the kind of roles that you perform. Now, coming back to board positions, I think experience, of having been on the operating side of companies and having dealt with boards, and particularly having dealt with extremely high quality boards and tough boards that give you a very tough time in your operational world, are very, very critical components for you to see. And I have been fortunate that I have seen boards across the world. So there's a wide spectrum of experience and international board members. And that gives you a very nice myriad of experiences of what people come through, and people of various backgrounds. And that becomes very critical. Operational success and corporate success lends a lot of credibility to your position, because people listen to you if they know that you've got something at the back where you've actually walked the streets and dirtied your hands or rolled up your sleeves.
Absolutely.
So I think those qualities are very, very important. I have been fortunate that in the board positions that I have been, I've learned on the job. As I did with the CEO, I never had a mentor, but I learned on the job. I went through the school of hard knocks by myself, got bruised on the knee, but learned along the way. But wonderful ways. Like people said, if you want to learn how to swim, you have to be thrown into the deep end of the pool. Um, I think the experience of having worked with good boards and not so good boards have both been valuable. And today, I often say this in most of the talks that I have with people, is that they say that when you're in trouble, you keep your friends close to you, but your enemies closer.
Yeah,
And today, at the stage of the career that I'm in, and with my experience, I keep my failures closer to me than my successes. So that's why when you spoke about me in laudatory terms, it was fine. But I think what I would like to share with people is what really goes wrong. And in business, what's very important is not only what to do, but what not to do.
absolutely. I truly believe that. There's a huge school of thought which, however, say that if you concentrate on the areas of weaknesses, you tend to take focus and power away from the areas of strength. You said that you keep your failures closer in focus so that you know what not to do and what not to repeat. Because the best and the most effective teachers are mistakes which are done only once. Okay, that means, don't do the same mistakes over again. So I get that. But with regard to your position as a director, what skill sets which made you arrive specifically uh, to be selected as a board member, can you speak about a few anecdotes, if they are not too personal, of the hard knocks, the failures which you're keeping close to, which you're showing, because that will help our listeners a lot.
Well, first of all, let me tell you that you said something which is very important. And I don't want viewers to misunderstand when I said I want to keep my failures closer to you than my successes. After many, many years of work, when I went to Harvard Business School, one of the first things they taught me in Harvard Business School at a very advanced age of my life was that don't waste too much of your time on your weaknesses, work on your strengths.
Correct.
And so you're absolutely right. But like you said, failures teach you a lot more. Learnings are very, very important, and you share learnings. I almost always find, and I'm not saying this out of too much humility, but I'm saying that whenever I've been successful, it's because I feel it's been right time, right place, right team to support me. Things worked out. But whenever I have failed, I always see that there is something that I might have done wrongly as a leader. And that is why it is very critical to remain grounded despite whatever successes happen. Well, I have, there were instances where I was in a board which was not a listed company, and there were times when people would have a board meeting where somebody would just walk in, and I would sit there as the chairman of the nomination and remuneration committee. And by the time I got my hot cup of tea and sipped it and saying, okay, what's on the agenda, somebody turned around and told me that the meeting is over. And I said, really? I thought, when did we start? And that gives you a reflection of how people look at committees like remuneration committee, stakeholder committee, CSR committee. The only committee that people seem to pay some attention to is the audit committee. And that's because the statutory auditors are breathing down your neck. But I have found over a period of time that if you do a lot of hard work in the subcommittees, the board meeting becomes by itself a lot more fruitful. You actually you do a lot of groundwork in that particular aspect. Um, the other thing is that at times I have found that I have been to boards where you are really treated extremely well by the operating team. You're fetched from the airport, you're limousined around, you come in the morning, and the moment you sit down, somebody on the board sits down and say, okay, so guys, everything is fine, but what time is our grand lunch? So it's just people ticking boxes. The papers would have arrived the night before, and there would be tons and tons of paper designed in a manner that you won't be able to read it. And the most important decision about the company not being able to achieve its target would probably occur on page 60, which you will never reach. And minutes of the previous meeting would not be discussed, action points would not be discussed, and everybody would finish 2 hours and go away. Now that's really where most of the problems lie, because I feel that while a lot of people feel that after they retire, acquiring board positions is a natural next step, I firmly believe that it should not be so. I mean, you should be looking at board positions as your next big profession. because you bring a lot of responsibility, and particularly in the role of independent directors. And I think the role of independent directors is not very well understood widely. The core qualities required in a successful board meeting is really, I would say, trust, respect, and courage. And if these three things are not common between the operating CEO stroke executive chairman versus the rest of the independent directors, those boards are going to struggle. And with so much emphasis on corporate governance, and you've seen what is at stake today for independent directors, and I actually sometimes feel that a number of independent director positions in India today are not being taken up by very, very capable people, because of the onerous responsibility and the penalties that they are subjected to.
Correct.
But the point is that how are you equipping independent directors to be aware of what's really going on? Now, if you see the success of, let me take an example of a company like Enron, which is famous.
Right.
It was supposed to have had a very fraudulent, situation where it was one of the most famous, corporate fiascos ever. Somebody like Sharon Watkins, who was the chief whistleblower, she went and actually told the CEO of the company that there were problems, and he never raised it to the board. And that board, if you talk about financial discipline, it had a Stanford dean, it had a CEO of an accounting firm, it had the CEO of an international bank, it had a hedge fund manager, it had an Asian financier, it had an economist who was heading the government. And with that kind of a board where you have ticked all boxes and more, you start thinking, why did they have a financial irregularity?
Yes.
So therefore, just building your boards with personalities is not important, because everybody is watching the other person. I'm going to tell you a little story which is unrelated to a board. But many years ago, when security was tightened up at one of the airports, there was a time when you had a barrier for the police, and then the airline used to check it, and then there's to be a third check at the aircraft. So it was very stringent. Those are the times when there were little troubled times, a lot of internal strife. So I went and asked one of the people who was in the police, and I said, he was a very senior person, and I said, what do you think about the general state of security? He said, the more number of barriers that you put up, the lesser the security. He says, because the first guy is thinking, if I slip up, the second guy is going to check it. And the second guy says, if I slip up, the third guy is going to check it. Whereas if you have only one neck to wring, he is going to check everything thoroughly. And that's what happens in boards, because you suddenly find very big names, and he said, okay, he must have checked it, and he's on the board, and he's checked it.
Right.
And your efficacy in the board is directly proportional to the information that is being provided to you. And I want to change the word from provided to the information that is being fed to you. So, and that information that is being fed to you is being fed in a manner that you will take a decision that will be cohesive with what the operations require. No, I'm not for a moment suggesting that operating teams are villains and boards are holier than thou. But the point is that each one of them is abdicating their responsibility. So unless you have respect and regard and the trust and the courage to say no, because, as I was talking to you the other day, Bharti, the job of a teacher is not to teach, but to ask the right questions. And if an independent board member is not asking you uncomfortable questions, and if you say that, look, I'm very, very irritated with this person because he keeps asking a lot of uncomfortable questions, then he's not doing his role. And that independent director himself, if he doesn't get answers to his difficult questions, should actually, I would recommend, step down from that board, because it's not worthwhile. So I find that there's a general dilution in governance, and this is a longish answer to a short question. But the fact is that when I was, for example, you talk of a small country like
Would
Malaysia.
you like to speak up a little bit, Sandeep?
Okay.
Yeah,
When you
this is
talk about a small country like Malaysia, for example, which I was
correct,
heading there,
correct.
it was one of the finest boards I've ever seen, you know. And the chairman of the company, who was a non-executive chairman and who was actually not associated with the day-to-day running of the company, or chairman of the group for example, he was very particular that the boards were absolutely strict and of very, very high stature. So we had people of very, very high stature in the group. The chairman of the company was an ex-ruler of the state of Selangor. We had the directors coming in from PwC in London, who were very senior people who knew audit in and out, very, very fine, experienced people who had run Shell and things like that. Now, as a result, what happened is that good governance was an airborne disease. And the directors actually would arrive 3 days before the meeting started. And they would have a series of one-on-one meetings with operational heads. The audit committee chairman, for example, would spend an entire day just talking to different business heads to understand what are the audit issues. The second day, he would sit down in detail with the internal auditor. And by the time he reached the board meeting, he would actually represent the company on audit. And he would present an audit paper to the chairman and saying, these are my findings of the audit committee. I have seen very little of that happen in many companies. I'm not saying that this is true of all companies. And that discipline of the ability of the board member to pull up the person and saying you have not done this and it is not acceptable to us is where governance happens. But remember, in this whole process, please remember, I was the CEO of the company. I could have turned around and said, I don't want the audit chairman sitting around for 4 days with my operating team. And one of the problems that happened later on in that board was that the board became so powerful in asking questions to people that over a period of time, I used to feel that the company was working from one board meeting to another board meeting. 70% of the time, people were getting ready to prepare papers for the next board meeting.
That's
And
a common fear, actually, because
yeah.
most the fear of independent directors comes from the angle and the perspective that they will micromanage.
Yes. So I think this comes to a very interesting question. The question is, and I can see Divya is back. So I'm saying, the question is, what is an ideal candidate? Sometimes you take existing CEOs of other companies, of large companies, to sit on boards of smaller companies. Now, CEOs are always itching to do operations. So it's very hard for an operating CEO to sit back and give advice as opposed to saying, no, let's do this. And he suddenly puts on his CEO hat. And there's a very thin line between getting deeply involved in a company's operation for support versus meddling. And so I go back to an adage, which is, like I said at the beginning of my speech, and saying, all these qualities are required of everybody, not only board members, which is what I call the Buddhist middle path. You can't go here, you can't. On the one side, you are challenging teams. On the other side, you have to support operational success, which means you have to have deep understanding of strategy, knowledge. You have to spend a disproportionate amount of time walking down manufacturing units, going to distributors, talking to customers, spending time with vendors, because these are the people who will give you perspectives of what is actually happening.
So
And
how
I'm
much
not.
sorry for interrupting you, Sandeep, because you said that I'm asking from the perspective of independent directors. And you have been on nomination and remuneration committee also, because it's a natural segue into the next aspect of onboarding and orientation of independent directors. In the course of this onboarding and orientation, are independent directors expected to speak to vendors, procurement heads, because that would also fall into the area of micromanagement and meddling into the operations of the company.
See, this is where I go back to my words and saying trust, respect, and courage is very important. If you are going to go around to snoop in an organization, you are not welcome. And I would urge that the CEO shouldn't do it. But if you are able to extend the arms of the CEO, if you're able to extend the arms of the operating team, if you're able to find fresh perspectives that they may have missed. It is a give and take. Actually, in fact, in my case, I found that there were a couple of directors on my board who were extremely, extremely insightful. And I used to actually say that, would you have the time to come and talk to my people? Would you have a time to go and do this for me? Will you come and talk to a few of my analysts and investors? And just imagine when you look at a company and somebody says, what is the first thing that somebody comes when he wants to promote his company? XYZ is on my board.
Yes. Yes.
Before he talks about his brand, he talks about his board. Why does he say that? He says that because he wants to establish stature, credibility, and trust.
Trust.
Saying, if XYZ is on my board, and then he also attracts other quality people. So the kind of people who join the company in senior positions, they look at the board and saying, wow. Financial institutions look at that and I said, oh, this is a company that has credibility. We must put money in it. Yeah. The others will come in and say, I would like to be part of this board as well. So it works well for everybody. But you are right. I mean, a very thin line is there between meddling and interfering. In fact, when they did some research in Harvard Business School on what is the right formula for boards, they actually found that a lot of people said, the board should be young because people have become long in the tooth, because that was one of the observations for the Enron thing, saying people had become long in the tooth, they had become dinosaurs. And they are far removed from business.
The average age was in the 60s, I guess, right? Enron?
No, in fact, one example of a company is like US Post, which had a 70-year-old director who was hired at 70, and he worked with them for almost 10 more years. And I'm in conversation with another company today where a very, very famous man, and I might not like to name him, all of you know him. He's now stepping off the board at 92. Now, extremely competent. So therefore, age has nothing to do with it. In fact, they have found that by statistics, the older the board, despite the fact that people may say that they're not current and they're not relevant, etc. See, it's always the quality of the person. I have found some outstanding chairmen, and the one quality that is common between outstanding chairmen is not the age. They're age agnostic, but they are curious. They will ask you so many questions that you will fall down without answering half the questions, because they're so inquisitive, because they want to know. I, for example, I could have gone and got into hundreds of boards, but I didn't do that because, Bharti, as I was mentioning to you some time back, unfortunately for many people, for both the boards and the board members, they are trophies for each other. And you go into cocktail parties and you say, I sit on this board and I sit on that board. And I don't want to name the companies, but if you know at some of the companies that have gone under the scanner, yes. A couple of years ago, if somebody had a choice of being a board member on that company versus a startup, he's saying, oh my God, what are you talking? And today you see where they are. They did not have bad boards. Yes. Another board where a particular CEO of the company committed a folly, the chairman sprung up immediately and said, no, X has not done anything. I don't want to mention the gender. And without even checking whether anything had happened. Because some of these boards, unfortunately, Divya and Bharti, they become, an old boys club. Yes. So, I know my friend's friend and the chairman's friend and the family friend, and it's a nice, cozy little thing. So there is no dissent. If there is no dissent in the board, if there is no genetic diversity where people come with different ideas and backgrounds, there is no benefit. You might as well have, somebody just announce, and which is actually very, very prevalent. In some cases, for example, compensation to board members is so large that they are compromised. Okay. There are some of them could be people who have retired and come from services where they didn't earn that kind of money, and suddenly they come onto the board and they see that kind of money. Come on, independence goes out of the window. Absolutely. So it becomes a pension scheme. So
that's what I wanted to ask you, because you're on nomination and remuneration committee as well as the council. What is your thoughts at that point of time?
Okay, so I must come back to this because, in many companies, and I think I'm very happy to see now, Bharti, that companies are taking nomination remuneration committees seriously. And for example, for the last 10, 12 years, I have struggled to see companies where their stakeholders meeting happens. Today, we have companies where I'm very delighted to see stakeholder meetings happen, and the chairman of the stakeholder committee says, "Has the customer complaint been handled? Have you done this for shares? Has money been paid?" And I'm saying, "Wow!" Earlier, it was just you blink and miss.
Correct.
So now with the nomination committee, for example, if the starting point is okay, I need to get an increment, I need to get a bonus, so nomination committee. But today, I mean, in one of the companies that I work for, I find that I have really changed a lot of ways in which the nomination committee, the stature of the committee has moved. It works very closely with the CHRO. I mean, let's look at the COVID situation. I mean, what is the role and responsibility of boards during COVID?
Obvious.
So the first thing is, what is your succession plan? You know, stranger things are happening. Suppose by chance your CEO goes under,
Yes.
what's your contingency plan? And why are you feeling so bad about asking the question saying, oh my God, the moment the CEO sneezes in the boardroom, I'm worried. Because there is no succession plan and the company could really tank. And let's not talk about CXOs coming up. You can say that in a Hindustan Lever or an ITC where they're got 6.5 and a dozen of people who can become CEOs because they're all groomed in that manner. But in smaller mid-sized companies, it doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
So therefore, nomination committee must work on succession plan, must see whether the compensation is working. Are we on the right plans? Are we following a proper process in which people are getting motivated? I mean, the easiest thing for people to come and do in COVID is saying, boss, we have retrenched so many people, we have reduced so many costs. Now, my question is, it goes back to my thought about customer service, where people say, our company is celebrating customer service week. Now, what are all the other weeks in the company? Do you torture customers?
Take for granted.
So my point is, what is this suddenly cost control move? That means all this while you've been luxuriating. Cost control is like brushing your teeth. You have to, whether you're making money or not making money, cost control should be part of your DNA. This is running of a business. It's not spending your dad's money. So the point is that today, when you see some of these measures being taken, it frightens me because I'm trying to say that, look, when a CEO of a company, for example, is making a call on a Zoom call, for the first time in the history of companies, there is no backbencher. There is no junior guy hiding at the back, avoiding eye contact with the CEO in case he asks him a question. Everybody is seen on the screen, and I'm saying, okay, Bharti, what are you doing? Okay, Divya, what are you doing? So it has democratized the whole process. Look at that power. Look at that power. And I'm asking all the CEOs today in COVID situation, are you first asking, guys, what's happening to sales and business? Or are you saying, guys, are your families healthy? I mean, I'm asking as the nomination committee chairman, I'm saying, you've said work from home. What have you done to make his home office proper? Half the people cannot afford Wi-Fi, they cannot afford computers. I mean, let's look at this. The most important furniture in the office is your chair.
Yes.
If you don't have a good chair, you'll fail. You have to disproportionately spend money on chairs ergonomically. Correct. So what are they doing? So which company is actually saying, okay, these are my critical people. Do you have Wi-Fi? Do you have a computer? And for example, today, and being ladies, that this WFH has been a real problem for women.
Yes.
You are expected to do all your work, and the younger women who have got smaller children, they are having to attend to children. Somebody's running around. They have also got to look pretty on the face. The man comes all scrambled and it's supposed to be cool, but this lady has to be proper. She has to do half the homework, and she's doing the same number of hours. And her boss doesn't hesitate to call her on a weekend.
Yes.
So I'm saying, where is that? So I'm saying these are the kind of issues that I'm even raising in a nomination remuneration committee. I'm saying that, look,
so empathetic of you, Sandip. I'm so glad because most board members live in ivory towers. I'm telling you, they are totally diverse from what is happening. Okay, Divya is also on the board of 2 companies, so I'm sure she's going to be taking pointers also here. So great.
No,
Yeah,
because,
please continue. Please continue.
so I was
It's really
saying,
wonderful. I'm sure most of our women listeners and women directors will also be applauding you.
no, but actually
Uh,
I'm saying it's not only about just I'm not making a gender statement here, but I'm
Agreed.
just saying that, you can say many things about empathy, but you have to step out of your world and you have to see how to make, I mean, people are working in small homes. Food is a problem, social distancing is a problem, children at home are a problem. I mean, a very wrong example to take, but my driver, for example, I was asking him, how are your children studying? And in his poor little one-room Kholi, his children are trying to study from a mobile phone. And how tragic is that? Similar things at a different scale are also happening in the homes of other people who are your employees. So anyway, so I'm saying that board members need to constantly keep the conscience going, and and this time they need to hold the hands of the management and say, okay, this is a difficult period, let us tide it together, let us look at contingency plans, let us look at risks. And it's better to be a devil's advocate at this point. But then, this COVID situation has, as we have all been saying, that despite all the sadness and sorrow and gloom that we have around us, it has really tightened up a lot of things, made us very efficient.
yes.
Meetings are smart and tough. I mean, if I had gone to meet you in your office, I would have probably come an hour earlier, had a cup of tea, stayed on for another hour, another cup of tea, then driven for 2 hours. Now we are done in an hour and we are finished and we are crisp. So there are values to things. Workplace needs to change, for example. Now, for example, I want to know how many companies which have been looking at, before COVID happened, everybody was boasting about open offices. Now you can't have open offices.
Office. Yeah.
So now that doesn't mean that you put people at chairs which are at a distance. That's not your new design. You have to throw out your old design and do a completely new configuration. You have to have no touch kind of things. You have to define where your corridors, where people move, one-way traffic. When you go and meet at the photocopying machine, you have got to do social distancing. So who is thinking about all this? Or everybody is thinking, no, this will get over. It's just like he's got a flu and the flu vaccine will, the moment a vaccine is announced, everybody thinks now it's fine. But corporations the way of working needs to change. So therefore, compensation, in a time when a person is going through a hardship, the easiest thing to do is to snap his compensation by 30%. And you sort of, Tom as the CEO, saying, I'm reducing 10%. Your 10% is nothing. Even if you went without a salary for a year, you'd be fine. But
Correct.
not him. So I think some of these things are very, very important. They have to be taken forward even post-COVID into, workplace turnaround, succession planning, the contingency plans. And you have to help companies take the difficult decisions. And the other thing is that during COVID, for example, I found in the companies that I work with, we are having more frequent board interactions with the company. Again, not because we want to be meddlesome, because we are always saying that, look, if there's anything you need to decide, a quick decision has to be taken, get us onto a call, and in an hour we are done.
Right.
And that is also making it a seamless kind of a process. It's working out quite well, actually, I would say. But nomination remuneration committee, I find, is a fascinating committee, and it is coming of
Say
age.
right now, you recall our discussion, and you were saying that unfortunately the audit committee all along in 1956 Act as well as the new 2013 Act has always found the pride of place amongst all the committees. And we just, we have completely in alignment on the fact that audit committee is after the fact. So it's always post-mortem. Okay, so it's
Absolutely.
going to be coming to light when it's decomposing the fraud or whatever, and it's giving off the stench. And that's when the audit committee really looks into it and you find the fraud. The people who are perpetrating the fraud are basically being recruited, are being acquired. The talent is being acquired, and the KMP, the important CFO, the CRO, risk officer I'm talking about, the internal audit head, These are all the people who are necessarily being vetted by the nomination and remuneration committee, in my opinion, because people are the most important.
Oh, no question at
So
all.
we were also in alignment on the discussion that if a person is of the top excellence from the top business schools and his integrity is even vaguely in question, all his qualifications and all those star-studded, resumes fly out of the window, and we would go for a second grade B school, whose integrity is like, beyond any type of a doubt. So I wanted to ask you, as a chairman of the nomination and remuneration committee, along with the board evaluation process, do you have this, a constant review of your talent acquisition?
So today, in at least two of the companies that I sit on, where I'm the chairman of the board, in chairman of the nomination committee, I spend a lot of time in the hiring of very senior CXO teams. So, with the hiring of a CXO, of a CHRO. But here I must also compliment the CEO of the company and the management that most of these requests actually comes from him. And I'm saying it is a result of the fact that there is a deep bond and trust that we are both trying to help each other. And I also realize that, someone like him who's sitting in the middle of a storm, uh, and the whole sea is in a bit of storm, and you have to sort of understand that he can't handle everything, and he needs to have as many hands as he can. Unfortunately, the most of the hands that he has are people who are junior or less experienced, so he reaches out to the board. And I can speak for myself. With somebody like me who had been a CEO for 20-25 years and has run 20,000 crore, $20 billion companies, scale, size, problems we've all faced. So I become a co-traveler with him, you know, and it also ensures a kind of a diversity in attention to the thought. Sometimes some things are picked up by X and some things are picked up by Y. But one thing that is very important, Bharti, is the fact that irrespective of what, we talked about a subject like integrity. How do you check integrity in a interview? You don't leave a 10 rupee note and then go off to the bathroom to see whether he picks it up or not. The point is that reference is very important. And most of the companies, I find that even the CHRO references are references of people that the candidate has recommended. Now, the candidate's references are not important. Like, for example, anytime you want to know anything about a company's financial health, go and ask not their bankers, but go and ask their vendors, saying the vendor will tell you whether they're paying money or not. You know this very well. So therefore, you have to find the right. Similarly, when you go into talking to people for referees, you talk to their peer group. So I always ask this question to people, saying that, look, if you were, how would your juniors view you? How would your contemporaries view you? Or how your bosses would view you? And then I compare with their bosses to see whether they're similar questions. Therefore, I always urge and that the CEO, when he's hiring a CFO, for example, he himself must pick up the phone and talk to the other CEO and have man to man or woman to woman chat to say, tell me, because we are brothers in arms, because we are both CEOs, and the viewpoint we have will be very different from what the CHRO or the referee says. And even, sometimes even references go wrong, but very rarely, because then, when somebody's at stake, his own credibility is at stake, he's very careful about what he says about a person. So I think that helps a lot. And we, in our board also, we a group of two board directors or the CEO, we all sit down together and we also interview people, just because it also allows us to understand, to look at interviews at different points of view. It's a shared knowledge. We sometimes include the CHRO so that she also understands that, you know, these are the kind of things that we are looking for. And these are some perspectives that you would find. So as you progress further in the interview process, you find that a lot of these questions have already been asked because people have learned along the line. So it makes the process much sharper.
So with regard to independent directors, because as I told you, a number of our mentees are aspiring directors, eminently qualified, and just raring to get onto boards. as a nomination and nomination committee chairman, where do you feel that they should position themselves to be invited on boards?
See, I haven't had a very good track record in getting invited, so I'm not the right person. But I must say that, I mean, jokes apart, I must say that, you know, networking is important with the right kind of people. But that's only not to go, like I said, you should not seek out a position. It's always nicer to be picked and nicer to be chosen, because then people are choosing you for what you have done, rather you soliciting what you're doing, because it's like a boy and a girl wooing each other, so you only wear the right lenses. But the point is that
That's it.
when so my point is that if you really want to factually know people, you really need to spend lots of time. I actually spend a lot of time one-on-one with people on interviews, even for directorships, etc. And when you're asking somebody to speak on another director who's going to be your co-director, it's sometimes awkward to ask him questions like an interviewer. So you simulate a discussion in a deep manner, in which you actually find ways and means to discover the person's thought processes on various issues. So even in a conversation, you can see a person's values and integrity. Because for me, the first thing is the value system. And like something I was telling you the other day, Bharati, that values are not values if they're not difficult to do.
Come again, please. Again, we faded out.
I said values are not values if they are not difficult to do.
Yes.
You don't take temporary holidays from value, saying आज 4 दिन मैं value करूँगा, एक दिन के लिए मैं value छोड़ दूँगा. Value is always a value. So therefore, if people don't have values, and if independent directors are looking at not being courageous, if they're looking at not being tough in asking the right questions, and I'm not saying that toughness means attrition. You can always have the iron hand in the velvet glove. So the point is that it's very important that, and the other thing I must tell people, that this is a commitment. I chose my directorships very carefully because I felt comfortable with the ownership. I felt comfortable with the mission. I felt that I could impact this organization. I could see that this organization could move from a X million dollars to a couple of $1 billion in a space of time. It was also in an area of interest for me. I also found that the company needed my help in some areas, and as 4 years from now, 5 years from now, I may not be relevant to the organization in the stage and life it is. And I must be the first person in the nomination committee chairman to say, listen, I think you need this skill. That kind of selflessness is very important, and you're doing a role. Somewhere down the line, by the virtue of your performance, you also start mentoring senior management, and that mentorship is very, very important, so I think prospective directors must look at courage, integrity, commitment of time. Because I feel that if I spend, people say, my God, you spend 20-25 man days as a board member in the company. I say, yes. I mean, I'm not collecting board memberships because it's not the money. It's because I want to really understand the business, because I can't help otherwise. Yes. Because if I'm going to be a Sunday uncle who pops in and then goes away again, in 2 hours, I'll contribute nothing. I'll only say all the right things. So, and I'll conform. So I must, and then, this area of corporate governance is very, very important. So understanding of Indian corporate laws is one thing. But I think a lot of times intuitively, what is the right thing. An application of integrity, and this is something that cannot be taught. It has to be from within. It has to be, you're either an honest person with integrity or you're not. Nobody can teach you to be that.
There's no such thing as being a little bit dishonest or a little bit
correct.
honest.
Absolutely. So, so I think, I was looking at something, and I thought I would read out something to you if you permit me. Yes. Sir Adrian Cadbury, who was the chairman of Cadbury. Sir Adrian Cadbury, who was the chairman of Cadbury. He wrote a very nice line for the British Company Law Board about. He was the chairman of some reform committee, and he was writing a word, and he wrote, and this is something very important for everybody to note, corporate governance is concerned with holding the balance between economic and social goals and between the individual and the communal goals. Very important. The governance framework is there to encourage the efficient use of resources and equally to require accountability for the stewardship of those resources. The aim is to align as nearly as possible to the interests of the individuals, corporations, and the society. Now, why I like this statement is that most people in board meetings will discuss customers and the company. Who is discussing stakeholders? Who is discussing society? Nowadays, it's becoming fashionable to say, oh, we are doing CSR. Every Tom, Dick, and Tiwari is doing CSR. And everybody is doing the same thing. Women empowerment, because it's fashionable, I have some views on appointment of women governors, women directors to the boards also, which we can talk about. But I'm just saying that don't do it because it's fashionable. Do it because it's right. Also do it because you can actually impact. Also do it because you have a role in society. And this is where, I learned a lot, Divya and Bharti, from Malaysia. Yes. In Malaysia, the stock exchange actually was reviewing the aspect of providing tax relief for companies that were putting a proportion of their profits into what they called corporate responsibility. They expanded the definition from corporate social responsibility to corporate responsibility. So there are a couple of stakeholders. So in that, you have your customers, you have your company, but importantly, you have two other stakeholders, the community and the employee. So companies are actually rewarded for what they have done for the overall upliftment of their employment. Are they providing healthy workspaces? Are they providing them development processes? Are they being caring in healthcare? Are they, these are very important. And that is part of nation building. And, then the environment. So you can't, for example, if you see a company like Shell, for example, and I'm thinking of Shell because, we often talk about oil spillage and all those but the kind of work that a company like Shell has done on society, for ecology, for the environment, is because they genuinely understand and feel for the environment. And we all know that in the stock market, companies are rewarded for the companies that are empathetic to society and customers. But half the companies do it because somebody has told them that if you do this, you'll get a better stock evaluation. They don't do it because in their heart it says that.
So, coming from that point, I just wanted to say, corporate, these things, when we talk about reinsurance rates and insurance rates, today I was just reading an article that the reinsurance rates which were hardening, they are giving you credits like carbon credits. Reinsurers are giving you better rates for huge corporates. Okay, if your ESG quotient is high. So they see whether the corporate has engaged in ESG quotient for the last 3 years. And if that quotient is high, the reinsurance rates are a little softer than the regular reinsurance rates.
Which is a good thing because, look, you can always appeal to the conscience of an organization and saying it should come from the heart and all that. But, regulatory regulations, policy, etc. have to all, there's an old phrase which says that what you expect is what you inspect. So if you don't kick the tires, you will not know whether there's air pressure. So similarly, you have to put a framework of policies and incentives. I'm not a one who wants to penalize people because everybody wants to, sorry, I'm digressing, but if you call a millennial today, the millennial is actually very charged with the greater good all the time. All the people in the world want to actually do good. So if you appeal to the greater good, it happens. But you sometimes need catalysts, policies to incentivize people. Then suddenly it becomes a habit. And then you start finding, oh, wow. You start, if you have a pet at home and you start throwing a biscuit every time it does something good, after a while it starts behaving well. So we are human beings are no different. So, the point is that what you said is very critical. So therefore, people must examine that where should, and corporates are always saying, okay, I'll do this, but what's in it for me? I mean, for heaven's sake, you have made tons and tons of money all your life with your customers and just giving back to society. And this is where, again, the board plays a very important role. You know, they are the conscious people, the wise men and women sitting on the board saying that, look, and we all say that, look, after going through this whole thing, please understand that this is what works at the end of it. Because a lot of younger people look at shortcuts and this. I'm not saying all young people like that. Some young people are really more emancipated than older people. And, just a small story I'll tell you. When I was about 20 years old, I went to watch along with a friend of mine, Swami Chinmayananda's the discourse on the Gita. So he suddenly picked me up in the hall and he said, hey, you're sitting. And like youngsters, you always want to get the front seat. So I went and stood on the front seat and said, how old are you? I said, I'm 20. So how old is your friend? I said, 22. And he said, okay, why are you here? So I said, Swamiji, I was very scared. But I said, look, I'm here because I believe I don't understand a lot of Gita. I know it as shlokas, but I don't understand half the things. And I believe you're very good at it, so I've come to hear it. So he said, have you seen the people around in this room? And he said, yes. How old do you think they are? I said, they're about 60, 70. And he said, so why have you come here? So the whole hall started laughing. And he said to the people, why are you laughing? Why do you come to me when you are 60 and not when you're starting your journey?
Very nice.
So the point is that as older members of the board, you have the ability to tell everybody that don't wait to learn till you are 60. Get to know my failures now and do it, because this works.
I would exactly, take this point, what the story you mentioned. Today we have a lot of startups in Indian, corporate culture. And if at the startup phase, we are nurturing those directors well in a right direction, I'm sure when they, move to a sustainable corporate, they will have better practices already imbibed, and that time rather than, going exactly what you said. So I think that's what we are, working really hard, on that front. So,
Divya, you're so right. It's like why do you want to send your children to a good school?
correct.
Because you're saying, good values, fundamentals, physical instruction, right teachers, moral science classes, catechism, and all that will happen. So the children will grow up with the right frame of mind.
Correct.
Because, you're building character. And therefore, in a number of startups, there are benefits to them if they are choosing carefully who can take them further. Now, let me tell you, there are a lot of people who are sitting to become board members of startups because they think they'll make hell of a lot of money. So the first thing they'll ask these youngsters is, what stake will you give me? Because they want to suddenly piggy ride on this youngster and get rich quick. And because they've got lots of money, they are throwing a lot of seeds and they don't know which one of them will become a eucalyptus tree. So my point is that you have to be careful as to who will actually mentor you and help you grow, because startups have problem of scale. They don't have plan B. They usually have only plan A. They struggle at plan C. They are not refined enough to understand organization building, structures, and they don't know what the pitfalls of things are. They generally have an idea. And you see, some of the greatest startups and businesses in the world, the person who started it quietly sat aside and put a professional CEO. So, it had no change in the stakes that the owner had, but the owner put the business in the hands of the right people. And the board, suddenly, like you said, no, it puts the startup on an escalator to growth much faster than others, because they're imbibing the right values and the right processes right from the somebody like me, when I see a startup, I say, okay, what's your process? What if you make this mistake again? How will you eliminate this mistake forever? What are you doing about the people? Have you got the right people at the right place? How are you managing your money? What will you do when your shoe pinches here? These are all the very important questions.
Correct. Absolutely. And I remember you mentioned at the beginning that when you started your journey, you learned everything on the job as director, and you didn't have a mentor, who can guide you or coach you. So my question here, is that, do you think at that time, if you would have had a right mentor, uh, your growth journey as a director, as a CEO would have been a little different what then it is today. I'm sure. The way Bharti has mentioned about your, wonderful journey. Uh, so, what's your thought process? I mean, do you think at that phase, if you would have had mentor, the situation would have been little different, or some expectation, or something to add on that?
Divya, very, very good question, actually. I took an executive coach in my life at the age of 51.
Oh,
And I went to Harvard at the age of 57. I'm sorry, I suddenly gave away my age, but I'm just saying, but I'm saying when I went to Harvard Business School, I thought to myself, I should have come here 10 years earlier. When I got a mentor, I said, I wish I had this mentor sometime earlier. But let me also say that it's not fair for me to say I learned everything on my own. You see, when people, I joined a management training scheme where there was a lot of mentoring, and I was given all round skills in DCM, and it was one of the finest management schools in the country. The DCM levers and the Tata Administrative Service schemes were wonderful schemes, and these schemes have produced some of the largest numbers of CEOs in India in the last decade. Of course, a lot of them are now septuagenarians, but I'm just saying that. So one learned also by watching people. So sometimes there is mentoring that is an organized crime, and sometimes there's mentoring by watching.
watching.
So you watch a number of people and you imbibe what you do. But you see, the problem of that is that you are hesitant sometimes to ask questions to people who have not got that relationship with you. And people generally hesitate to expose their weaknesses to a boss. They hesitate to express their weaknesses to a colleague, and they also hesitate to tell their weaknesses to somebody reporting to them. So who do they talk to? They'll talk to their wives or husbands. And their husbands and wives are the worst mentors because they are so unconditionally, they favor you that they are blindsided about all your faults. So they don't give you honest feedback because they are so much affection for you.
I,
So
I,
if
don't agree with you, because I am, probably when you are saying this, I am sure I am, one of the luckiest one. My husband is my best critic, and he keeps, questioning me, if you are doing this, why, when I started Mentor My Board, he was the first person to question me, what's the need, why you're doing it, who's going to come, and n number of questions. So that actually keeps me on my toes to do something better every time. So
so good. I'm very glad. So behind every successful woman, there's a man. So I'm saying,
absolutely.
so well, that's true. I mean, you're right. I'm sorry if I generalize, but I'm just saying that when you have somebody who is
True.
professionally trained, and who's and there's a difference between a coach and a mentor. Mentors are people who will take you through processes, give you options, tell you ways and means to do this. Coaches are a little more structured. They will say, sit like this, don't fold your hands, throw your voice forward, speak like this, write this memo like this. They're a little more structured. They have techniques that they have learned. Do you need that? You probably need a bit of that too, because there's a science to it and there is practice to it. But mentorship is lovely because it's, even if you see in olden times, the greatest of kings had a guruji sitting somewhere at the side. He, and every time there was a problem, he'll say, Maharishi, what do you think should be done? It's not as if the king didn't have the answer. He needed a validation. And so I think mentoring is very good. In fact, I was very fortunate, I would say, that although I say that I didn't have a mentor, I didn't have a mentor as a CEO because I did not succeed anybody. So I was not groomed for the position. I was thrust into it. And I'm fortunate that I was. But as a youngster, I benefited greatly from the DCM management training scheme. And I actually today I feel sorry that a lot of people are actually thrown into the deep end of the pool. And of course, now with the digital world, time has become asymmetrical. So there is, what used to happen in 6 months is now happening in 2 hours.
Yes.
And everything is like, acha, koi baat nahi, there's been no orientation, go to the computer, press this, and you'll have all your tutorials. You're not even talking to humans anymore. So the point is that, but the fact is that there is a lot. Why do you use the word wisdom? It's not only the knowledge. Knowledge will come on its own. Everybody will find his own path of knowledge and but wisdom is something that comes a lot with experience, with failure, with having seen things, and having somebody who can be your alter ego, somebody you can bounce issues with, where there is no agenda, where there is no, what should I say, there's no risk of a relationship, but somebody who's unadulterated and unconditionally supporting your success. And somebody who can turn around and say, you know what, I think this is not a good idea for you. Rather saying, don't worry, you can do it. But, and that's where sometimes spouses fail. But except for one successful spouse who did one mentorship thing, but the other the other ones are people who will tell you, no, you'll succeed, you'll do well, because they don't want to discourage you from doing anything. But mentors are people who sit across the table and say, nee, I know I've seen a couple of people doing this. I don't think you have the skill.
Thanks.
So that's where I think it's very important. I think mentoring is a wonderful thing. And startups need mentoring like nobody's business. And the only thing is that it's very sad the manner in which a very large number of mentors and mentees have the relationship they have right now. And the monetary aspect of it is something that is actually clouding judgment.
Correct. Very sad. Coming back to two things. Again, one way I wanted to get your inputs on your opinion on women directors, how they can be inducted onto boards, how they perform on boards, and how they can better perform on boards, how they can position themselves to get the best board positions. Because being a woman myself, I think that they're eminently suitable to be positioned as independent directors. That's one input. Going back to Cadbury's statement, the word which actually caught my attention was stewardship of resources. And the human so-called resource is the most valuable resource. So again, like how far do you feel that Indian boards, Indian corporates are stewarding this most important resource? Okay, so two aspects. One is on women directors, one is on stewardship. Because part of mentoring is also stewarding that resource, very valuable resource for the company.
Bharti, my sister-in-law has written a lovely book called Shakti Leadership. And, her name is Nilima Bhatt, and she's written it with Professor Raj Sisodia of Babson College, who wrote that wonderful book on conscious capitalism, which is again a wonderful seminal book, which is a bestseller. So when your first thoughts that come over when you look at Shakti leadership, you're saying that, look, women leaders, what are they? But she spoke about something much broader and said that, every human being has a masculine and feminine trait about them. And a good leader is actually a happy mix of both these traits. So Shakti leadership is a trait rather than saying, okay, women are the Shakti and power and therefore men get lost, we are coming. So that's where confrontation happens. Now, initially, because of the environmental situation and cultural situation in India, there was not much available in terms of a pool, and we all know that. And for obvious reasons, we don't need to go into all that. But the pool was smaller. With the pool being smaller, it was difficult for people to pick people on merit. And also the number of people who were able to crash the glass ceiling was also low. And as a result, because of the low pool, there was always a reluctance to hire people because they were feeling that they were pushing out a more competent male counterpart. But today, all that has changed enormously. So the question of whether a woman director brings value or not is not even under question. I can tell you the kind of delight we have when women directors sit on the board is because they bring some wonderful perspectives. First of all, I don't want to make a blanket statement because there have been exceptions, but fundamentally, I find that women are more empathetic and have a much higher emotional intelligence. Now, I could be wrong, but they tend to empathize and sympathize a lot more. They also deal with problems in a very different way than men do. And that brings a particular kind of perspective to organizational reform. They also, are, the integrity and honesty levels are very high by nature. And as a result of which, that adds another beautiful layer to the quality of the board, if you really look at it in that manner. And today, the other day, Bharti, I had the opportunity to speak to a group of people who are the Young People's Organization, Young Presidents Organization, and they were mostly women. And I was asked to speak to them, and I tell you, it was such a delight because I got questions which were completely different from what the male lot would ask you. And it was so refreshing. I learned so much along the way. And I said, yeah, I haven't thought about this. True. So, they bring a certain perspective. But let's not talk about men and women anymore. The question of, this women being on the boards is now a no-brainer. There is no question that board members will have to be from, you will get women board members. And I think, like we talked a little while earlier about policy, saying sometimes policy needs to help grow something. It's like reservations help bring up societies. We've had the suffragette movement and all those kind of things. But now with this reservation policy and, have women on board, you're forcing a particular movement, which is also breaking barriers. So now it has, I think, launched itself. We look at some of our leading banks, etc. The women leaders all over the place. So now it's not a problem. In fact, you have some very, very competent people coming through. Of course, there are still areas where we need a lot more people, particularly in the areas of, in India, and it's not so much across the world, but in India, you need people in the areas of technology. You need people in the area of, you mostly find human resource backgrounds, finance backgrounds, law backgrounds, to some extent now brand and marketing. But, the number of CEOs coming through was less in the past, but now it's becoming to be larger. But people in the area of technology, for example. And I'm saying in the future, when a large proportion of women will be CTOs who will come from technical backgrounds. And I'm happy to say I sit on a board where one of the lady members is actually on the board because of her technical background. And she's the most technical of all of us, so which is wonderful. And so it's like breaking a tradition and sort of a male bastion, so to say. So I think but what's more important in boards, Bharti and Divya, is genetic diversity. Yes, gender diversity is important, but genetic diversity is very important in boards, to have people of different ilk, as a result of which you get perspectives which are very different. Sometimes people ask, why do you want to have an academician on your board? Precisely because he'll ask the theoretical questions. Precisely because he'll ask about fundamentals. Precisely because he'll ask about research. So, or somebody from a completely different background. The other day we were putting out a panel for discussion on economics, and I asked them to pick up somebody like Chetan Bhagat, and they said, Chetan? I said, yeah, he will give you a perspective on economics and life, which you will not get from economists. And it will be such an entertaining discussion. And he's, of course, somebody who's very well read and very well informed and delightful. So, boards are similar. You need to bring in core people. You need to bring in people with subject matter strengths, but who bring different aspects of that. But what is very important also is that when you get people who have done CEO level jobs, they bring perspectives beyond their subject matter. So, people can talk about HR, and people can, when I sit on a board, I'm not only talking telecom. I am doing now organization structure. I can draw up a strategic plan. I can do a branding plan. I can tell you a technology roadmap. I can do all that because as a CEO, I've done it. I can do your budgeting. So I can actually contribute. So if you've got 5 CEOs, I was telling one of my CEOs that you are like Ravan. You've got a 10-headed CEO group. So that's very, very important.
Wonderful.
So, Bharti, sorry, what was your second question?
On stewardship of resources.
Steward. So stewardship of
Responsibility.
yeah. So stewardship is actually a very fine word. I'm glad you picked it up. Stewardship is a very fine word, as it is for board and CEOs per se, because stewardship is very different from leading and captaining or whatever. It's being steering the ship to the right direction. So if you see my email has got a line underneath, which is an old Portuguese proverb, which says, when the sea is still, anybody can steer the ship. So the ability to stewardship is very important. So, just this morning, I was having a chat with one of the companies which put up a strategic plan. And I said, I want to know on every board meeting, how are you stewarding your resources towards that strategic plan? And the resources range not only from investment in money and infrastructure, but people. If you want to be an X billion-dollar company, do you have the right people today? You are familiar with cricket. If you see an under-19 cricket team, you are asking the boys, okay, he's very talented, but will he make it to the Indian Test team in 5 years from now?
Right.
And we have seen many a bright sports people fall away by the wayside because they didn't make the cut to the bigger picture. Right. Same with companies. Now, the other thing is to say, oh, this fellow is a precocious talent, and I'm going to train this person to do this. Look at the number of people in India who failed as precocious talents because they did not have the right temperament. Sachin and Vinod Kambli came from the same school, had similar records. One was a phenomenal success, the other was not. I think Vinod Kambli not making it as big as Sachin Tendulkar was an institutional failure.
Yes, I agree.
Correct.
So same thing happens with companies. You have to make sure that the teams, that the talent is there. How do you hone it and how do you build it up? That is what large companies like Levers, ITC, GE, these large FMCG companies, for years and years, they have just mastered this.
So that brings us to the crux of Mentor My Board. Stewardship also includes, in my opinion, mentoring. Mentoring of boards, startups, family boards, and mentoring of directors. Your take on what Mentor My Board can do? What are your tips? What do you feel about Mentor My Board?
I think I was mentioning to Divya at the beginning of our conversation that the time has come, or it's already probably past its time, it's already overdue. Boards must be mentored properly because propriety, success, governance, and when you're entering into new areas of environment and people, why I'm calling them new areas, because a lot of companies have always seen it as ROI and things like that, and they have not looked at the broader position of companies as citizens of society. And when you're looking at those kind of skills, you are looking at very broad-based board members who are astute in the business, who have got financial governance, have no astute in strategy, good in marketing, good in business, but at the same time who have that empathetic sense to understand the role that the companies have to play in the contribution to the society and the nation as a whole. Because if companies rise, the nation will rise. They like they say, in a high tide is a great tide when all the boats rise.
Wonderful.
So that's where I see the mentorship. So some of the mentorship can come in from the chairman, some of them can come from the outside. Like, for example, Bharti, in Malaysia, before you become a board member, you have to go and attend a 3-day training program, irrespective of your background. And it's very important to see at all points of time that it works. But sometimes, people are afraid to ask somebody else, I don't know, because you are a board member. How can you ask somebody I don't know? But in a training program, you can do all that. So that becomes very, very important. I don't think we do enough of that in India. We are now putting everybody through a test and all those kind of things, which is now a lot of people actually sort of perspiring like they did their school leaving certificates. But, but that's very important. But the other thing is, sometimes I feel good directors by themselves do a kind of transverse mentorship with their own performance on boards. So you don't have to act as a mentor, but by sheer example of your performance, you actually pull everybody. I have seen that happen in many boards that I've sat on, that if you work hard towards asking a certain set of questions and people see your success, they see your gumption, they see that you're getting by, and they see that the kind of questions you're asking, they see your preparation, it starts rubbing off on others without you saying anything.
Wonderful.
So sometimes
Exactly, even I have seen the some of the wonderful independent directors, once they move out of the organization because of their completion of their tenure, the new person who comes on board as independent directors, they actually handhold that person, and kind of a mentoring happens there. So absolutely well said. And I think for when you spoke about women director, I think it itself is one very, very detailed topic, and we would like to have a separate interaction with you on that. So thank you for being here with us on this platform of Boardroom Talk series, and it was really, really enlightening. And I have taken
Very
so many
interesting.
tips, and I've taken so many pointers which I am going to use in my journey of mentor my board. And I still treat myself in work in progress, lot of things to be worked upon myself. At the same time, when I'm helping others to groom on their skills, we have a panel of mentors, eminent panel of mentors. So I would really request you to be with us as a mentor on this platform. For that, we'll have a separate discussion altogether. But thank you so much for such a wonderful insights today. It's
Very,
really
very
thank,
a
interesting
pleasure to
insights.
have you
Thank
with
you,
us.
Sandeep. Really.
thank you, Divya and Bharti. You can see that Vidya is probably a good fisherwoman. Uh, so, but anyway, thank you very much. But I'm delighted, Divya, by what you said, by saying that we are all learning. And let me tell you that I am no expert, and I'm not again saying it with any kind of whatever. There's so much to learn from youngsters, from others. Every day my daughter teaches me so many things which are perspectives which I don't get. And if all of us even in boards have to keep learning from each other and the boards, and we have to evolve with times and get relevant with times. One last thing I would like to say, which we of course is another topic completely, but I leave you with that thought that the world has become a lot more digital, and board directors must understand that they must tame this animal called digital and understand it rather than run away from it, because it is there to help us perform even better.
Correct.
It has taken away a lot of routine and rigor. So thank you very much for inviting me, and it's been a pleasure talking to you.